What's going on, guys? In this video I'll be showing you how to bring in the heat on these Air Jordan 10s and turn them into a Fire Force custom. For those who don't know what Fire Force is, it's a series that recently got an anime adaptation, and ever since I started watching the anime I've just been hooked onto it, and I thought this would be the best base to make it as a custom. In this video I'll be giving a brief explanation and tutorial on how to go about the process of a custom. Say if you're working on a sneaker, a book bag, or anything that has leather. So with that, let's get started. Before we get into the customs or any sort of paint job, what I'm going to do is use acetone and cotton balls to take off the factory finish off the leather, so when I go to do the paint job it'll easily stick. And say if I were to wear this custom, I won't have to worry about the paint cracking after everything is done. When you're working on a custom that involves leather, you want to take your time with it. Acetone every area as possible that you're going to be working on, and make sure to double over it, triple over it, as long as it has a tacky feeling to it when you're finished. You'll know that it's not properly prepped if it still has a smooth feeling. This step alone can make or break a custom, especially if, in this case, a sneaker, if you decide to wear it, or if you're doing this for a client or a business. As soon as the sneaker gets worn, all that paint job and work is just going to go for nothing, because as soon as the first crease happens, all that paint's going to crack. After the prep step, I'll be inserting shoe trees into the shoes. What this will do, this will give me an even and stable surface to work with when I go in to paint the shoes. And since this is a used shoe, this will also take out any heavy creasing that was already on the shoes. As mentioned before, the key step is prep. I'm going over the shoe once more specifically the areas of creasing, because that's where the paint will be flexing the most. And just to check to be sure if there's any imperfections or any factory finish that I forgot to take off with acetone and cotton balls. More than likely I'll be wearing these if I decide to play basketball with them. So I want to make sure these are as perfect as possible, and there won't be any risk of cracking from the paint once we go into the paint job. Another key step into the prep is masking. You want to mask off the area that you don't want to get paint on, or you don't intend to paint at all. And in this case, I'll be airbrushing majority of the surface, so I'll be using napkins, tape, and an X-Acto knife. An X-Acto knife will help me precisely cut off any excess tape in the area that I am going to paint versus the area that I don't want to paint. This is also a step you want to take your time with, because you want to get every surface that you don't want to get paint on. Otherwise, if it's on something like fabric, then it's going to be really hard to get that off, or nearly impossible to get that off. After masking up the shoes, I'm going to cut out my reference photos and then place them onto the shoe, so I have an outline for my more detailed paint job. Off camera, I masked off the areas that I outlined from the reference photos. Now what I'm doing with an X-Acto knife is cutting off the excess tape from the masked off area. For this step, you want to take your time as well, and if you're using an X-Acto knife, don't go too hard into the leather or the tape. Otherwise, you'll see cuts into the leather and you're going to have to take more steps than what you need to, or if anything, you're going to damage the leather and you don't want to do that. After masking off the areas, the next thing I'm going to do is add some Jacaro opaque white paint and apply it all over the shoe. Even though it's majority white, what this is going to do, this is going to give me an even surface to work with, and it will mask off any imperfections, like minor scuffs. So one quick tip when it comes to painting, whether it's by an airbrush or a paintbrush, you want to start with light coats. I would say after the third coat, you can go in a little heavier, but between your first and third coat, you want to start off with light coats. If you go in heavy, the paint job's basically going to be for nothing, because as soon as you wear it, it's going to crack immediately. This would definitely be the difference between your custom and another person's custom. Now that we have an even base to work with, the first color I'm going to start with is bright orange from Jacaro. I'm going to use my airbrush gun to apply it around the areas that I masked off to give it a fire effect. For this, I'm going to start with a bright color and kind of go back and forth between darks and lights. Just like with the white paint, you want to apply light coats. Only difference with the bright orange paint, it looks like it's covering everything, or the area that I want to paint around, but you still want to apply light coats and multiple coats just to have a secure paint job and you don't have any risk of cracking. Now I'm applying opaque red from Jacquard into my airbrush. One quick tip when it comes to painting with airbrush, if you're looking for a gradient effect like I'm applying here, you don't want to clean your airbrush immediately after using the paint. What you want to do, you want to dump out whatever excess you have of the paint that you used before, and then put in the new paint that you're putting in this case would be the opaque red. So when you go to apply the paint, the orange will go first, and then it'll create a gradient into the red afterwards. Off camera, I applied opaque yellow paint from Jacquard around the areas that masked off, and I also applied flat black paint from Angelus onto the toe area. The next thing I'm going to apply is the glow-in-the-dark Fire Force bands that the Fire Force members wear on their uniforms. But before I can get to that, I'm going to use tape as a guideline to help me make crisp lines. Same thing when it comes to taping, you want to take your time with this, especially if you're going to have paint on top of it, because the paint can leak through if you don't tape it properly. Before I can work on any color, I need a lighter surface to work with. I'm going to use my airbrush to apply white paint, so the next color that I add on can apply on easy. Another tip when it comes to airbrushing, you want to make sure that the area you don't want to get paint on is covered up. In the case of here, I just use napkins and more tape to mask off the areas I don't want to get paint on. You don't have to use napkins, you can use plastic wrap, bags, wherever you know that's not going to have paint go through. Now that I have a lighter surface to work with, the next thing is to apply a pre-mixed blue onto the toe area. This mix is pretty easy. It was Bahama Blue from Angelus with a little bit of white. It should give you a close match to the glow-in-the-dark band. You want to apply light coats just like as if you were applying paint with an airbrush. With a paintbrush, you want to go in multiple directions so you can prevent any brush strokes showing when you apply more coats. Now with the same paint and a little bit of water, I'm going to apply it to my airbrush. I'm going to apply the paint to the edges of the blue to give a glow in the dark effect to match to the Fire Force series. Even though the paint isn't glow in the dark paint, it's neon paint, which if it's under a black light, it'll have a similar glow, just like depicted in the show. Before I go into airbrushing, I'm going to prep the area by covering the spots that I don't want to get paint on. In this case is the gray color that's in the middle of the blue. So far so good. The toe area actually came out better than what I thought. Now we gotta take off the areas that we masked off so we can go into the detail paintings. Don't worry if you have a little bit of paint slip in through those masked areas. You can always touch it up with regular paint or whatever paint that you need to paint on the masked areas. Now that the tape's taken off, we can start adding our details to those masked areas. You want to use scissors or X-Acto knife to start cutting out the reference photos that you used, and the areas that you cut out, you want to use a marker or a pencil to outline them to give a bigger picture onto those areas you masked off. It'll make it easier to paint onto those areas. Now that we have our outlines lined out, only thing now is just apply the paints. As you'll see, I'll use different variations of paints. Some of them I'll mix and some of them I'll just use straight from the palette. I'll use vanilla, orange, yellow, white, black, brown, and I believe gray. It'll be different shades of gray, as you'll see in a little bit. Now that we finished the detail work, only thing left now is just to replace the factory finish that we stripped off earlier in the video. I'll be using Krylon matte finish to replace that factory finish. Not gonna lie, these actually came out better than what I had planned, especially in the toe area. I would say that's my favorite part. It just gives the whole shoe that pop. It just screams Fire Force. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video as much as I did doing the custom. This is Blxck Fox, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.